All right, this is test 159, section 2, passage 4. It's supposed to be a doozy. It probably is. It's at the end of this section. I'm not going to pull it up on here so I don't get copyrighted either from r/LSAT or from LSAC. So we're just going to have to follow along with me. Yeah, 159, section 2, passage 4. RC is the same as LR. You have to read slowly, slower than you want to. And then you have to engage with what you're reading, and you have to summarize it as you go so that you can put it in your brain in bite-sized chunks that you actually understand. Because my working memory is shot, and I can't keep all of this in my head. Summarization's good. All right, let's try this. For most of the past century, scholars in the Anglo-American legal tradition have been skeptical of the view that legal ownership is a matter of possessing any single right. Okay, so for the past 100 years, the majority of scholars in this tradition think that ownership is more than one right, probably. It's not a single right that you can possess. They have advocated the view that ownership is a bundle of rights arising from individual judicial decisions in widely diverse cases, such as the right to lease, sell, subdivide, and tax. So yeah, their view is that there's a bundle of rights and that it notably comes from judicial decisions. I've got the Invisalign lisp, forgive me. Accordingly, the concept of ownership per se does not constrain judges' decisions in the resolution of conflicts regarding property use, since the set of rights corresponding to ownership is itself a product of earlier judicial decisions and is open-ended. Okay, so according to this view, the judge's decisions are sort of unconstrained because judges made it up, and so you make it up so you can dismiss it. All right? This theory has been criticized by recent proponents of an older view that ownership is a basic right to exclude others from a particular thing. So the original, this new view is that the right just comes from judicial decisions. There's these bundle of rights, and it's all complicated. And there's proponents of this older view that like, hey, you just have a right to exclude people from your stuff. All right. According to this boundary theory, appealing in judicial reasoning to the right to exclude others is by definition equivalent to appealing to ownership. And so the concept of ownership constrains judicial reasoning. Now, what the hell does this mean? So this boundary theory, the one that you can exclude people and then you just have this right to it, when you appeal to that right to exclude, it's kind of like ownership. So if I have the right to say, I don't know, no one else can use my car, that's kind of like saying that I own the car. Right? It's just a different way of looking at it. Like, I own the car, it's my car versus it's no one else's car. I guess that's the way we should think about it. Like, it's my car versus the boundary theory, which says it's no one else's car. And if it's no one else's car, then I'm like the only one left. So it's mine. Okay. But while the boundary theory properly recognizes that there is a concept of ownership that constrains legal decisions, it fails to explain crucial features of ownership. Okay, so the author has an opinion here. The boundary theory properly recognizes there is a concept of ownership that constrains legal decisions. So this first view thinks that the decisions are unconstrained. And the second one says, no, they are constrained by this natural right to ownership, this natural right to exclude. Okay. But it also fails to recognize crucial features of ownership. All right. Indeed, we might better characterize the view as a theory of non-ownership. It makes sense. It's focusing on excluding rather than who's the actual owner. Okay. Its focus is on the position of the non-owners, defined in terms of a general duty not to cross the boundaries of objects one does not own. Yeah, like ownership is like, you don't have a right to it, so like leave it alone. All right. And the duty of I have not to interfere with someone else's property. The boundary theory, in effect, relies on a process of elimination to distinguish owners from non-owners. An owner is the last person left after the exclusion of everyone else from the object owned. But this provides only the weakest possible account of the owner's special position. By default, the owner is the only one at liberty to use the object after the exclusion of others. All right, so the author doesn't like the fact that we're only getting to ownership by eliminating everyone else, right? They don't like the fact that we get to this being my car because it's no one else's car. Okay. While there is a grain of truth in the boundary theory, in so much as ownership is an exclusive right, okay, I'm going to stop here and find out what this means. You have to go slow. The boundary theory is right in that ownership is an exclusive right. So the author's agreeing that ownership is something that you can exclude other people from. Or like if I have a right to a car, then I can exclude you from the car. Okay. But boundary theory wrongly assumes that what it means for ownership to be exclusive is just that others generally have a duty to exclude themselves from the object owned. It's fine with it being, the author's fine with exclusionary, but it doesn't like the fact that exclusionary just means that we've eliminated everyone else. All right. However, there is a distinction between a right's being exclusive in the sense that it excludes others from the object of the right, and it's being exclusive in the sense that its holder occupies a special position that others do not share. Right. So you can get to ownership two ways. You can exclude everyone else, or you can say, actually, the owner has this special relationship with the property. So you could say, I'm the owner of the car because I've excluded everyone else and I'm the only person left. Or you could say that I own the car and I could exclude others because I have some kind of special relationship to the car, or special position is what it says. All right. And the author seems to be a person in favor of this special position view. Okay. A third theory, the agenda setting theory, regards ownership as an exclusive right in the second sense, but not the first. So what is the second sense? Like when you see this, you have to stop. You cannot just move on. You have to stop and think, okay, what is the second sense? And if we go back, the second sense is that the owner has a special position that others do not. We have to keep that in mind. So in this agenda setting theory, ownership is exclusive because the owner has a special position with regard to the property. Okay. What it means for ownership to be exclusive is that owners are in a special position to set the agenda for the resource, such as farmers determining the specific uses of their land. Right, we kind of got this. Owners have this special thing. Kind of a restatement of previous sentences, I think. The law preserves the exclusivity of ownership not by excluding others, but by harmonizing their interests with the owner's agenda-setting authority. Huh. This is an interesting new concept. So the law is not preserving exclusivity by excluding owners, or rather, it's not preserving ownership by excluding others. It's preserving the concept of ownership by harmonizing the interests of others and the owner's agenda-setting authority. What does this mean? What interests would they have? I have to think about this. So I'm thinking of guns here, right? And the agenda-setting thing would say, okay, the owner of the gun can set the agenda of the gun. They can decide how it's used. However, other people still have some kind of like interest because they don't want to be shot by it. So according to the agenda setting theory, you'd have to balance the interest of someone to own the gun with the interest of people not to be shot by it. And through that process, you defend the idea of ownership. Ownership is kind of like a negotiation between the person who controls the object and the rights of others, the interests of others. And that when you take the interests of others and you harmonize them with the owner's ability to decide what to do, that's how you get to ownership. So this theory might say that gun ownership is strengthened when there's a harmony between gun owners being able to do stuff with their gun and other people being protected from that gun, their interests being harmonized with the owner. Okay. This, rather than the boundary theory's exclusivity, is the essence of ownership. So the author is now taking a position. They like some aspects of boundary theory, but they don't like how it gets there by excluding others. They really believe that there's this special position to set the agenda, that is, decide how an object is used that an owner has, but that the law preserves that ownership not just by recognizing that, but by also bringing in this concept of other people having interests with regard to that property. Okay. So this is just about, hey, there's these three theories. You have to keep that in mind. Boundary theory is like all right, but not quite there. And agenda setting theory is where it's at. That's what this passage says. Which one of the following most accurately expresses the main point of the passage? A, the bundle of rights theory of legal ownership, the first one that we talk very little about, is flawed because it fails to recognize. No, the point of this is not that the bundle of rights theory is flawed. The point of this is that this agenda setting thing is like the best one. That's the point. I'm not going to be swayed by this. Do not be swayed. You have to summarize and have an idea of what happened, like before you get swayed by just wrong answers. B, the bundle of rights theory, I already don't like it because we're not talking about the bundle of rights theory. We're talking about all these theories. Okay, but let's see what it says. The bundle of rights theory views legal ownership as a group of diverse rights, whereas the boundary and agenda setting theories view legal ownership as a single right. That's just not the point. The point of this is not to say that like the bundle of rights believes one thing and the other two believe this other. That's just not the point. The point is that boundary theory does all right, but it's not perfect. And agenda setting theory is where it's at. It's not B. C, the agenda setting theory more adequately captures the essence of legal ownership than does either the bundle of rights theory or the boundary theory. Sure. This has the opinion of the writer in it, that the agenda setting theory is better. It has the essence. This rather than the boundary theory's exclusivity is the essence of ownership. This looks good. The agenda setting theory is better. D, the boundary theory of legal ownership, while superior to the bundle of rights theory, fails to definitively distinguish between owners and non-owners. No, the point is not that boundary theory is better than bundle of rights, but they both fail to distinguish owners from non-owners. I mean, I think that they both distinguish owners from non-owners. And even if they didn't, that's not the point. E, the agenda setting theory of legal ownership is superior to the boundary theory because the agenda setting theory focuses solely on excluding others from the owned thing. No. I mean, it starts off okay. The agenda setting theory of legal ownership is superior to the boundary. That's fine. But the agenda setting theory does not focus solely on excluding others. That's what the boundary theory does. This confuses what the boundary theory is doing with what the agenda theory is doing. And the answer is C. Okay, we're not doomed. 23. According to the author, the boundary theory's method for distinguishing owners from non-owners. Okay, so let's not look at this and try to recall. A useful thing to do with RC and LR is, at least while you're practicing, get used to not looking back at the text. See if you can just remember, like stretch the muscle, stretch the mind muscle. All right. So we know that the boundary theory distinguishes owners from non-owners because the owners are everyone who's not excluded. You exclude all the non-owners and you get to the owner. Okay. So the boundary theory's method for distinguishing owners from non-owners, A, exaggerates the rights and responsibilities of non-owners while unfairly placing the burden of proof on ownership on the owner. We don't have anything about a burden of proof here. No one ever talked about a burden of proof. The author does not say that the burden of proof is placed on the owner. And as far as exaggerating the rights and responsibilities of non-owners, it doesn't say that it exaggerates those. The author just doesn't like the approach of exclusion, not that it has some kind of deleterious effect on non-owners. B, entails that owners can be definitively distinguished from non-owners in every case. No, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like, this is just saying that the boundary theory's method has to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. Why would it have to be? I challenge you to find in the text why it would have to be perfect. All right. C, leaves the rights and responsibilities unique to the position of ownership unexplained. I think so, maybe. Because it excludes everyone else, and then by default, you have the owner. But it doesn't really say anything about the rights and responsibilities of the owner. The author's point seems to be that this is why the boundary theory is not great, and why the agenda setting theory, I think, is better, because it does talk about the unique position of the owner. So yes, I think the author does think this, that it leaves the position of ownership unexplained to an unhappy degree. But let's see. Allows that some cases of judicial reasoning about ownership may be flawed. The boundary theory's method for distinguishing owners from non-owners allows that some cases of judicial reasoning about ownership may be flawed. The author just never says this. It may be true, but according to the author never says that cases of judicial reasoning are flawed because of the boundary theory's method for distinguishing owners from non-owners. If the author is right, maybe they would think this, but they don't say it. So according to the author is what we're being asked. And according to the author, we have nothing here. E uses one sense of boundary for owners and a different sense of boundary for non-owners. When did it ever discuss that there's two concepts of boundaries? It just excludes everyone and then says you are the owner. All right, C. It is indeed C. Yes, that is the author's main beef with this, is that the boundary theory doesn't bring up the unique position of the owner. All right, 24. Which one of the following is most strongly implied by the bundle of rights theory expressed in the passage? So which one is the bundle of rights theory? Let's try to recall this, eyes closed. The bundle of rights theory is the one that it's all just made up and it's not a single right. And if judges decided it one way, they can just decide it another way. Judges are unconstrained in their decisions. So what is most strongly implied by this idea that judges can kind of do whatever and judges have a lot of freedom in determining things because they're not limited by previous decisions? They've made it up so they can change it. A, two owners of distinct properties might not possess the same rights regarding those properties. So if the rights are just made up by judges and they can change, and let's go back to the text here. What does it say about this? The concept of ownership per se does not constrain judges' decisions in the resolution of conflicts regarding property use. This could definitely be true, because judges could just make a different decision, right? Because this bundle of rights theory is saying that the right comes from judges just making shit up. And so if judges are just making shit up and that's how you get your rights, different judges could make up different shit. At least in different countries, they could. Okay. And two distinct properties. Does that mean that one's like a house and one's like a car? And your rights could be different depending on how judges have viewed houses and cars? I'm going to select A tentatively, and I'm going to go through everything else. B, an owner is required to possess the material means of excluding others from the owned property. Where does it say that I have to be able to shoot people who are on my property? The material means of excluding others. I don't have to have a fence or a gun, according to this theory. It doesn't talk anything about excluding anybody by force. C, the agenda for an object owned must exclude non-owners from the use of the object. So this would be, if we were talking about the agenda theory and not the bundle of rights theory, this would still be wrong. So we're talking about the bundle of rights, not the agenda, first of all. Second of all, even if we were talking about the agenda theory, I just have to have the right, according to that theory. I don't want to look at it. I was almost about to look at it. I just have to have the right to determine the agenda, how it's used. I don't have to say that others can't use it, right? Like if I own a factory machine or I own a McDonald's, according to that theory, that means that I have a right to decide how it's used in negotiation with other people who have interests, right? That doesn't mean that I can't hire people to work at my McDonald's. They don't have to be excluded from using the McDonald's. I just have to be able to decide what we're doing with it. So no, wrong for two reasons. We're not talking about the agenda here. We're talking about bundle of rights. And even if it was the agenda theory, it's just wrong. D, ownership is an exclusive right because the concept of ownership is well defined. The bundle of rights theory. Ownership is an exclusive right because the concept of ownership is well defined. I don't think it implies that. Exclusive, I don't think is even brought up until later. I think all that is said about the bundle theory is that it's just made up by judges. And so they made it up so they can change it. E. Ownership is an exclusive right because the concept of ownership is open-ended. Where does it say open-ended? Okay, if we go back to the first paragraph, it uses open-ended there in the middle to describe how judicial decisions have come up with the rights in the past. And because judicial decisions made it, they can undo it, and so it's kind of open-ended. The bundle of rights theory is not saying that ownership is exclusive because ownership is open-ended. It's talking about the open-ended ability of judges to change things and to therefore modify these bundle of rights, not the concept of ownership being open-ended. And I don't think we've even talked about exclusive rights until later. That's the boundary and agenda setting, is more about exclusive rights. The bundle of rights is just like, hey, judges made stuff up. And so on 24, I'm going to have to go with A. Two owners may not have the same rights. Because if everything is just made up and judges are making stuff up and countries are making stuff up, fine, sure. Two owners might not have the same rights because those rights can change over time, especially depending on which judge you get. And A is right. Okay. 25. The author distinguishes two senses of exclusive right in the third paragraph, primarily in order 2. So before I look at it again, using my noodle, there was the exclusive right in the sense that you're excluding others from a thing, and therefore you're the default owner. And then there's the sense in which you can exclude other people because you have a unique position with the property. Why does the author bring that up? They bring that up to introduce the agenda theory. That's why they do that. They're setting the stage to introduce the agenda theory. Because it's like, hey, the boundary theory is this excluding people, but the agenda theory views exclusion differently. It views it as this thing that you do because you have a special right. Right, okay. So why does the author do that? I think they do that to introduce the agenda theory, but we'll see what the answer is. A, offer an additional critique of the bundle of rights theory. No, at this point, we're way beyond the bundle of rights theory. We're just litigating the differences between the boundary theory and introducing the agenda setting theory here. B, provide a way to distinguish the boundary theory from the agenda theory. Yes. Provide a way to distinguish. I don't like that language. I would say it's just introducing a difference in order to set up what the agenda theory does differently. But I suppose it could be their way of providing a distinguishing factor. I'm going to tentatively say B, and we'll see what we can do here. Suggest that the boundary theory is unintelligible. It never says the boundary theory is unintelligible. When you see things like unintelligible, you have to just say, he disagrees with it, or she disagrees with it, whoever the author is. But they're not saying it's unintelligible. That would mean that you can't comprehend it. They can comprehend it, they just disagree with it. Suggest that the boundary theory is unintelligible despite having the appearance of truth. They're not bringing this up to say that the boundary theory is wrong even though it looks right. They're bringing it up to introduce the agenda theory. That's what they're doing. D, explain the fundamental difference between the bundle of rights theory. Bundle of rights theory was way earlier. And the boundary theory. If this said the boundary theory and the agenda theory, I wouldn't be able to pick that over B. It'd be like B and D, I don't know. They sound like the same thing. But this is wrong because it's bundle of rights theory. E, show that all theories of ownership, other than the agenda setting theory, are confused about the meaning of exclusive. I don't think they've confused the meaning of exclusive anywhere in here. Exclusive means the same thing in all cases. It's just the way that you get there is different. So exclusive in all cases means that I can decide how something is used. I can exclude others from the thing. That's what exclusive means. The question is how we get there. The boundary theory says that you get there by just excluding everybody, and the leftover person is the owner. And the agenda setting theory says, no, the owner has like a special ability that allows them to exclude selectively based on what they want. And then there's this notion of like harmonizing the interests of other people with that right. But no, they're not bringing up these kinds of differences, two senses of exclusive right. It's not being brought up to say that the agenda setting theory is the only one that's not confused. All right. Am I right? Okay, it's B. I've explained this one poorly. I'll try to do better next time. 26. Which one of the following most accurately defines agenda as used in the third paragraph? Okay, this one shouldn't be too bad. A, plan for use. Yes. The agenda is how you can use it. It says here to set the agenda for a resource, such as farm owners determining the specific uses of their land. What they mean by someone being an owner is that they can decide what is done with the product, their plan for use. B, list of topics. No, it's not a list of topics. It's how they plan on using a thing. Timetable of events. It's not a timetable of events theory. It's a you can decide how you use a thing theory. D, the agenda means task to be completed. No, that's just not what it means. E, hidden motives. Nope. This is just like, can you read in context question. This might be one of the easier questions of the passage. Like maybe the passage is overall hard, but this one should be fairly easy. Agenda is used in these other ways as a list of topics or a timetable of events. Like the agenda for the wedding is, and that's like a timetable or like what you intend to do, tasks to be completed. Or you might say that someone has a hidden agenda, and that's like a hidden motive. But even then, you have to add hidden before agenda. An agenda just means plan. An agenda is just a plan. That's it. And in this case, it's just being used to say, hey, an owner of a farm can set the agenda, meaning they can determine how the farm is used, the plan for how it's used. 27. The author of the passage would be most likely to agree with which one of the following statements regarding the boundary theory? So they would agree it's right about some things, but it gets the concept of ownership wrong. Yeah, it's kind of right, but it's kind of wrong. I think my memory is failing me a little bit here. I'm not sure exactly what it will say, but we'll see if the answer hops out at me. A, it correctly identifies a key responsibility of owners, but does not correctly analyze the nature of ownership itself. No, one of the problems is that it doesn't analyze the responsibility of owners. It only gets to who's the owner by excluding everybody else. It does not do this. It does not identify responsibilities of owners. B, it was the chief target of criticism by the first legal scholars. We don't know anything about legal scholars criticizing the boundary theory. It's just never mentioned. We have no idea. I'm not even going to read further. We have no idea if it was the chief target of anything. C, it correctly identifies a concept that is necessary for a valid theory of ownership, but misinterprets that concept. What is this concept? Correctly identifies a concept that is necessary for ownership. Would it be exclusivity? Like it correctly identifies that exclusivity is needed for a valid theory of ownership, but misinterprets it. I think this could work. That seems to be the beef that this author has. D, it holds that ownership necessarily entails the right to sell the owned thing. I think you have to be able to use it, not sell it. Let's go back and check. Paragraph 2 is somewhere in here. Yeah, last sentence of paragraph 2. By default, the owner is the only one at liberty to use the object after the exclusion of others. So the theory only says that you can use the object, not that you have to have the right to sell it. E, it is derived from a more general theory of rights that is itself substantially correct. I don't think we know that the boundary theory is derived from a more general theory of rights. Where does that come from? What would that be? All of these theories seem to be in opposition to each other, not part of like some hierarchy tree. All right, the answer is C. Okay, we got through this. Okay, for RC, here's the trick. You have to go really slow. I work with students, and one thing I see is that they will just read things through. I have them like read something, and here, let me go back to it. And they will read like this. Um, they'll just read quickly. Like I see them do this. While there is a grain of truth in the boundary theory, insomuch as ownership is an exclusive right, the boundary theory wrongly assumes that what it means for ownership to be exclusive is just that others should generally have a duty to exclude others from the object owned. However, there is a distinction between a right being exclusive in the sense that it excludes others from the object of the right, and it's being exclusive in the sense that its holder occupies a special position that others do not share. A third theory, and they just go on, and there's like no pause. There's like no pause and no reflection. And I'm like, I don't understand what's doing. Like I got a 180 and I have no idea what's going on. You probably have to stop after every sentence and do just a little bit of an inventory. Like, what was this about? What's going on? How does it relate to other things? Does it make sense? And what I mean by engage, I guess, is like when we got to the agenda setting theory, and it told us that the agenda setting theory is about the law preserving the exclusivity of ownership by sort of harmonizing your right as an owner to decide what to do with something and other people's right to have their interests kind of understood. I thought, okay, what the hell would that mean? What does that mean? And I thought about it for a moment and I came up with guns. I don't know if that's a good example, but it's an example where an owner can like decide what to do with it, but other people also have like some kind of interest in it. Like, I don't want you to like shoot at my house. Right. And so like you might have a right in some sense. It's limited. There's boundaries to it by other people's interests. That's what I mean by engage. Ask yourself, what would this mean? What would an example of this be? And once you do that, you'll connect to it much better. You'll be able to sort of understand it. And it becomes less just like stuff that you don't understand. And then summarize as you go. Really simple. This is about three theories. The bundle of rights theory is judges just made shit up, and it's a bunch of different things from a bunch of different areas. And then there's the boundary theory, which correctly brings in the idea of exclusivity. It excludes everyone else, and it says the owner is the only one not excluded. So it's right that exclusivity is important, but it's wrong because it mischaracterizes exclusivity. It misses the nature that the owner has themselves. This agenda setting theory, it correctly identifies that the owner is in a unique position and that the law preserves ownership by recognizing that exclusive control that the owner has, but also recognizing that other people have an interest in the property. And when you harmonize those things, the right is preserved. Imagine a scenario where you said, gun owners can do anything what they want to, or knives or cars, because anything can be a weapon, right? Any kind of weapon, anything dangerous. And you just said you could do whatever you want. If you want to drive your semi truck 300 miles an hour down the highway and crash into people, so be it. Would people respect the right to own semi trucks? No, they'd get killed all the time. And they would hate the idea. The ownership, like that concept would never survive. Or if gun owners were just allowed to just like mag dump their neighbor's house whenever they wanted to for fun, how long do you think guns would be legal before people were in absolute rebellion? It wouldn't be very long. So this agenda setting theory is like, look, we have to have this idea that people uniquely own something, but we also have to understand that there's an interest that other people have in your property, right? Because your property can interfere with them. And that if we negotiate that right, then the law will preserve the right. Two different meanings of the word right there. If we negotiate well, then the right will be preserved. If we do it poorly, someone's going to get angry at some point. That's what this passage says. And if you can summarize that, you're going to do really well. So the words are confusing, and the sentences are run on. And it's not well written, but if you go slow, you engage with it, and then you summarize it, I think the bones of this passage are not that bad. The thing is, most people don't take the time that I took now, like all 35 minutes or whatever. It took a long time. They don't take that time. And so they never quite see how the reading comprehension passages come together. You rush through it in 10 minutes max because you have 4 to get through, and everything is kind of a question mark in your head. And so you get to the answer choices and you're like, I don't know, I'm not sure. And then you get things wrong and you don't know why it's wrong. And you think, this is just so confusing. It's confusing because you moved on before you understood what was going on, right? It's like if you had a math equation, and if you get a mistake at the first part of the math equation, that mistake will follow you to the end. And you will get to the end and you're like, I got the wrong answer. I got no effing idea what happened. And you might not know where you went wrong, because then you have to go through every step of that 100-step math problem and find out where you done fucked up. And no one wants to do that. No one does that. No one wants to do it. I don't want to do it. You don't want to do it. You don't want to review for 30 minutes. I didn't review for 30 minutes when I studied for the LSAT. People might claim they do. They don't. And so you're just going from passage to passage, never fully understanding what's going on. And that's how you get all messed up in these passages. So take your time. Do passages and questions untimed. Try to solve them. And to solve them, slow, engage, summarize, identify key things. Right? Like, it stood out to me when the author finally had an opinion. Have that stand out. When you see words that are interesting, like all or something like that, most, note that. Like, yes, okay, most. Stop at the end of every sentence or even every comma and say, okay, what the hell is going on if you don't understand? And if you try to summarize it and you can't do it, go back and read it again. When I do these, I have to reread constantly. I'm always rereading. Because you don't want to get a math portion wrong and then plug that in to all the equations in the future, and then everything is just wrong. And that's what you do when you read quickly. When you read quickly and you don't digest, you're inputting into your brain just bad information. And then the bad information is going to sabotage you all the way into the future. And you're not going to know. And you're going to look at it. And once you've got something in your head, like once an idea is in there, it's so hard to get it out. Like, because you're going to look at it and you're going to think, yeah, I know that. Yeah, I already know. Yeah, and you're just like rereading it and skimming it, and like nothing is really sinking in, and you feel stuck and you can't figure it out. It's because you loaded something into your mind wrong. And once it's in there, it's really hard to get out. All right. Hopefully this helps. The passage is doable. It's dense, but take your time. And if you see the next passage, if it takes you 40 minutes to break down everything and kind of understand what's going on, that's fine. It's okay. Once you start getting the clicks and you start understanding, then it'll get faster. No worries. All right. Bye for now.